Hello, everyone. My name is Adele. Please tell me what happiness means to you. True, everyone has their own. Money, love, friendship, family. I've always wanted parental attention. I understood that they need to work, so they do not have time for me. But I was already losing the sense of need in my family and so went to extreme measures. So, when I was very young, our family went through a very difficult period because we were poor. Both my parents were born and raised in ordinary families. They never had any connections or money. They married for great love. And then I was born. The situation worsened even more. My mother told me that once she even saw how my father wanted to commit suicide. She saw him put a noose around his neck. She called out to him and he seemed to come to himself, saw his daughter, that is me, and gave up this idea. Although my father denies this point, referring to the rich fantasy of his wife. That terrible moment cut into my mother's mind, and she decided to take drastic measures. She collected all the family savings, got into debt, and at her own risk invested the money in a small business. Unexpectedly for them, everything worked out. Gradually, the business began to grow more and more, and the revenue grew accordingly. A few years later, we bought a big house, 2 cars, a couple of apartments. My parents were proud that they had achieved everything themselves, and it really deserved respect. In the end, the money and work involved them to such an extent that they began to disappear on business until late in the evening and early in the morning. I had a babysitter a long time ago. She did send me to school, did my homework, read a book at night. Of course, I had everything I ever wanted. Rollers, expensive dolls, sweets, toys, dresses. But none of this could replace the most valuable thing. My parents, or rather their presence in my life. You know, it got to the point where we stopped seeing each other. If they had even come into my room to kiss me before, then that too had disappeared. But they didn't know that I sometimes waited until 4 a.m. for that kiss. And once on a weekend, when my parents were again in a hurry drinking coffee, while simultaneously reading the economic news from the newspaper, I stared at the robots, their suits perfectly pressed, their hair perfectly coiffed, their perfume expensive. They stared at the newspapers and kept talking about the economy. Our staff poured hot drinks with caffeine, and they didn't even look at them or at me. I took a deep breath at the table, but they didn't look at me. Then I coughed violently several times. "Yes, honey, are you all right?" my mother asked, also without taking her eyes off the newspaper. "Louisa, bring her some water," my mother said to the servants. "Mom, Dad, I have a suggestion for you," I said. I knew how to attract their attention with the keywords offer, conditions, money, business, job. They were always distracted by them. "This weekend is my birthday. Can we go somewhere together? For example, to our country house? We'll just hang there and have a barbecue and make cheeseburgers, huh?" "Sorry, honey, but we have to work. We have a lot to do. Can you choose something for yourself? Dad and I can buy you a new toy or a phone or a dress. What do you want?" she asked. My mood instantly dropped, and I was so angry with them that I wanted to explode. Is there anything more important than me? Why are they acting like this? "You can't buy what I want," I muttered and left. I cried pretty hard in my room that night. I wanted so much to attract their attention, but it was all in vain. I got a call from my friend Stacy. She, unlike me, was not born and raised in a rich family, and she only had a mother, but she was an incredibly smart and brave girl. Stacy told me to come up with a plan. "Look, it's no use talking to her parents, so you should do something to get them to pay attention to you. Since your situation has been running for a long time, you need to take drastic measures. Are you ready?" she asked me. I agreed without delay. On the weekend, on my birthday, my parents came to my room in the morning, kissed me, left a gift, money, and left. I told them I'd be hanging out with Stacy all day, and they agreed. My friend and I met, bought bus tickets, and went to a nearby neighborhood. I was very worried because I didn't know how my mom and dad would react, or what they would do, or if they would even look for me. Anyway, Stacy and I spent the whole day together in a strange neighborhood. Thanks to the gift of money, we bought and ate whatever we wanted all day, and in the evening, I rented a room in a cheap motel. Thank you, Stacy, for telling me that such services exist. We were going to spend the night there. Stacy's mom often worked night shifts, so no one was looking for her, and neither was I yet. The The babysitter called me several times during the day, so as not to cause a panic before the time. I picked up the phone and said that everything was fine, and later in the evening, I began to ignore all calls. Towards midnight, my mother called me once, and that was it. This disappointed me even more. Just one call? I don't deserve more than that? Then my father called once, and all. Then I decided to act. Stacy, on some program, recorded a voice message to my parents that their child was kidnapped, and if they want to see me alive, they must bring $500,000 to the specified place tomorrow morning, also warning them not to go to the police. She played the message into the phone, gave the address, and hung up. I don't know what they felt at that moment, if they felt anything at all. I didn't sleep all night. I thought they would just give up on me and that's it. I get home, open the door, and they're sitting at the table in their iron suits, drinking coffee, staring at the newspapers. The next morning, Stacy and I arrived early and hid with binoculars. My heart had been pounding for 2 days and I couldn't control my nerves. At about 7 o'clock, I saw my father's car pull up. Oh no, it was the first time I'd ever seen him so exhausted. His eyes were swollen and red and he looked older. It's like he'd aged 20 years in one night. My mother was sitting next to him in the car, constantly wiping her face with a napkin. She wasn't wearing makeup or a hairdo. They were both in yesterday's clothes. At some point, I was shaken by what I saw. What have I done? It flashed through my mind. Why did I go to such extreme measures? I felt sorry for my parents. I told Stacy I couldn't do it anymore and I had to admit it. We were about to get out of the place where we were hiding, but I accidentally tripped over a trash can and fell down with a crash. At that moment, the police swooped down on us. They twisted our arms, immediately blocking the road. I screamed that my name was Adele and that I was the missing girl. No one heard me. Stacy and I were really scared. I thought we were going to be arrested or shot by mistake. My mother came running to me through the crowd of policemen. She forcibly shoved everyone who was twisting my arms. "This is my daughter! Get your hands off her!" she screamed. Her and Dad picked me up. I was all tearful with fear and regret and begged for forgiveness. The police stood there in disbelief and did not understand what was happening. I shouted that I loved my parents and they would forgive me. My mom and dad hugged me tight. They probably didn't even hear me. The three of us sat on the muddy ground with our arms around each other, among a bunch of policemen, and talked about how much we loved each other. Of course, I later had to report for the incident. My parents paid the fine. We had a long conversation after that. I once again apologized for such extreme measures. Sorry, this is our omission. I promise that we will pay more attention to you in the future. We love you very much. This is all for you, my parents said before going to bed and kissed me. It was the best moment of my life. Now I know for sure that my parents care about me.
Hi guys, I'm Mark. My story is about how my parents stole my childhood. Every day I lived like a prison. My parents raised me quite strictly and not quite logically, in my opinion. Just took and cut out my inner self. But as they say, there is a silver lining. My parents were careerists, so to speak. For them, the first goal was to achieve high positions at work, and they did not want to think about children. But fortunately, at the age of 40, they still decided to have a child, and it was not without their well-defined plans and schedules. Before I was born, my whole life was planned, every detail, where I should study, what to do in my free time, what profession to choose, etc. And since childhood, I never knew what street games were, what fights were. I didn't even really have any toys, as if there was only training. In general, everything was like the army. Rise at 6, morning exercises, breakfast, morning training, and so on until the evening. Most of all, I liked when Aunt Lisa came to visit us, because at this time, my parents were distracted from me, and I could rest in peace. And my aunt secretly gave me sweets. Just so you know, my parents only gave me candy as a reward. At those times, my parents were gone and left my aunt in charge. Before leaving, they gave a clear plan of action, but my aunt did not like such methods of education and just got me a toy robot from my bag, and I played with him all day. But by the evening, my parents, seeing I had not completed any of the tasks, were very angry and began to quarrel with Aunt Lisa. After that, my mother came to me and took away my toy and gave me the paper where my daily schedule was written. I was an outcast at school. While my peers were playing, I was studying. I didn't really have any friends. One day, just walking home from school, I decided to go through the park. When I saw the playground, I couldn't help myself and stayed there to play. I did not know how much time had passed, and I returned home in the evening all dirty and stripped. My parents immediately took me to task, and they started accompanying me everywhere. This was where all the problems at school began. I became the epicenter for ridicule, and everyone began to tease me. Once we had an art day at school, and we were going with the class to the cinema for a French movie, where I went with my parents, as usual. In the hall, one of my classmates shouted, "Look who's here with his old bodyguard," and everyone started laughing. I couldn't stand it and ran away. I ran for a long time and don't remember where. I didn't notice and rushed to my aunt's house. When she saw me on the doorstep, she hugged me and offered me to stay with her. The next morning, people started knocking and shouting at the house. I realized they were my parents. No sooner had my aunt opened the door than my mother attacked her with accusations, and my father yelled at me and put me in the car and took me back home. I have already completely lost the desire to perform any tasks and rules, and I locked myself in a room and did not go out until one day my aunt came over with representatives from child protection agencies. They found out the whole situation and decided my parents were not engaged in education correctly, and they said they would take me to a boarding school and my parents had to go to a psychiatrist. This meant that I would now live separately from my parents and we would only see each other on weekends. In boarding school, life began to develop differently. I made friends with many children, and in school, you can say I had no equal. I participated in various Olympiads and easily won prizes. I even felt a kind of freedom. Over time, I began to understand why my parents wanted so much that I did not waste time on various useless things. They wished me a great future and worked hard on my upbringing. My parents gave me an excellent education. I know 4 languages and I participate in many Olympiads. I love them very much and I'm grateful, but thinking only about development, they completely forgot that a child should have a childhood. I can't call my childhood happy because even though they were beautiful people, I had a lot of psychological violence in my family.